I'm Dana Denha, and you're watching FYI. The Humane Society of Huron Valley is the premier place in Washtenaw County to rescue an animal in need of a forever home. One of their locations even boasts the ability to relax and take up a hobby with the county's cat population. Watch. The Tiny Lions Cat Café hosts a variety of events from game to trivia nights. One occurrence that gets the kitties purring is Knitty Cats.
It's kind of a weekly chance for people to come in and combine a love of knitting with cats, obviously. We noticed there was a lot of crossover between people who like to hang out with cats and people who would kind of bring their knitting here. So it seemed like it would be a fun idea to make a time when everyone could get together. And we also have a knitting expert on hand to kind of help with projects. So we'll get people who are expert knitters and we'll get people who are maybe beginning and want like an assist.
The cats give this yarn-filled event 2 paws up.
We could try having them help pick the yarn. But yeah, mostly they just make it cuter. Any chance we have to bring people in to meet the cats, I think is a really great opportunity to adopt. I think in an environment like this, when you're just kind of relaxing and spending some time here and letting the cats come to you and show their personalities, I think is a really great way for people to kind of fall in love with the cats.
I like it because it means that I'll actually sit down and crochet instead of getting distracted by my computer or TV or phone or insert other thing here. I'm here to crochet and there's cats, and if I stop crocheting I can look at the cats and know that they're judging me.
For everyone who has been here, thank you, because everything you do here, every time you come to an event or just pay an entrance fee, you are supporting the homeless cats in your community. So all that money goes right back to the cats.
For all the Humane Society of Huron Valley offers to our county, visit hshv.org. In today's technology-ridden world, it's easy to get distracted from your task at hand. But when you're driving, your concentration should be on the road and not on your device. Get the facts on distracted driving in this month's City Roundup in 60.
Hi, I'm Sergeant Bill Clock, the Edinburgh Police Special Services Section. I'm here to talk a little bit about distracted driving. Texting while driving does increase your stopping distance, so it's going to actually take you a whole lot longer to stop. Nationally, in 2016, there was 3,500 people killed in distracted driving collisions. And in 2016, here in Michigan alone, there's 43 fatalities and about 13,000 traffic crashes resulting from distracted driving incidents. Michigan Vehicle Code does prohibit sending a text message, reading a text message, or manually typing a text message. So please keep your eyes on the road, put the cell phone down, and be safe out there.
Opioid addiction is a crisis that has been ravishing this country. Children have lost their parents, parents have lost their children, and it's a cycle that needs to stop. Washtenaw County Public Health believes it is possible through their opioid education campaign. Joining me is Jimena Lovelock, Health Officer for Washtenaw County Public Health, and Molly Welch-Marahar, Senior Opioid Policy Analyst with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and a person who knows firsthand the effects of opioid addiction. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thanks so much.
So I would just like to talk about why the county felt the need to start a campaign like this. Have we been seeing stats raising, or is it just like what we've been hearing about for years now?
Well, the Washtenaw County Health Department has been involved with opioid work for many years, mostly starting with opioid surveillance. And so we would share data regularly with community members and stakeholders about what was going on with opioid-related poisonings and deaths. And certainly we were seeing increasing rates of opioid overdoses and overdose deaths. And so as a health department, particularly that focuses on health promotion and prevention in so many areas, we felt like it was important to really bring our health promotion expertise to the table to really work with our community members and partners in developing an opioid awareness campaign. And so the campaign was a long process because we really wanted it to be informed by community members who have lived experience with opioid disorders and overdose. But we also wanted it to be kind of driven by the feedback that we got from a variety of stakeholders. And so we developed an opioid campaign that really centers around 4 themes that we heard from all of the feedback that we received, which is stories of hope and recovery, really featuring local residents who are in recovery and who can share their own stories of hope. We also focus on harm reduction, the availability of naloxone, and also safe disposal of medications.
So Molly, why don't you tell us a little bit about your own story, because you're a part of the campaign. You sort of are the campaign.
Well, it's funny. My story intersects with this campaign in a couple of ways because I know Jimena through work that I did with our community around opioids. And one of the things that I worked with the Washtenaw Health Initiative Opioid Project as a project manager, but also I brought the lens of being a person in long-term recovery with me. But we did a survey of residents actively using substances and asked them, what was preventing them from getting care. And the thing that came up the most was stigma, and it was stigma specifically from care providers. And so my involvement with this is both like a labor of love and kind of a professional goal. Like I work with the department now, and I do work in the opioid space. But I think for me, my involvement here is really just to share my story in the hopes that it helps others feel comfortable accessing services. Because I think, promoting healthy behavior around opioids has a lot to do with being able to admit when you have a problem with them and then know where to go. And I think the first part of that is really the bigger barrier in a lot of cases, just because it's criminalized. And, depending on what community you're in, you might not have or what you look like, and many other factors, you might not have the same access. And then, worst of all, you may not be made to feel as if you deserve to be there or able to be there or should go there. And I think my piece on this was really to try to help address the stigma part and share my story of recovery to kind of normalize the fact that recovery happens and that there is, you can seek help and get better. I think we have a long way to go, but I was really happy to be able to participate because I think that it's an important thing to address. And probably, medicine is catching up in terms of interventions to help people, but attitudes are kind of still lagging behind. And so anything I can do to try to help address that, I'm all for.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as reading about this, you think like a lot of people probably do have like some sort of shame that they don't. It's like a private struggle. And I'm sure a lot of times even like your close family doesn't know that you're struggling because it could have been something like you had a surgery and it just sort of got out of hand and it's embarrassing. Yeah. So it's nice to know that like there are people out there that have been through it, and everyone has their own lives and their own circumstances that led them to that, but there isn't shame in it because, it's better to get help than to not.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one aspect that's really important about this campaign is, we named it Is Possible, leaving it open to lots of possibilities. But the campaign includes stories of recovery like Molly's and others, but it also includes a message about harm reduction. And those don't have to be 2 different separate things. They can be part of a continuum. And it's so important that we do everything we can to keep people who are using drugs healthy and safe until, if they're ready to make that decision to stop using and go into recovery. And so it's really important for us, I think, as we developed the campaign and as we got feedback about the messaging, that these don't have to be 2 mutually exclusive solutions or options. Harm reduction can be part of the road to recovery.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Yeah, because you have to be able to live to make it to recovery. If that's
exactly.
Yeah, and I think this is sort of like, I guess, like a simple sort of thing. But what is an opioid? What are we considering opioids? Because I think like a lot of times when you start, it's something little, and then it can evolve into like you're using heroin.
So I could take that. Opioids. It's funny. People who use drugs are often like secret chemists. Anyway, opioids are so they're a class of drugs. They include things like well-known names are probably Vicodin and OxyContin. Those are more prescription opioids. They're generally used to help people treat pain. But really, there's not a real principal difference between heroin and something like OxyContin or Vicodin. And actually, right now, the epidemic of people who are overdosing, it's actually the additive fentanyl, which is a prescription opioid, which is killing people because it's so powerful. So, I mean, they are kind of on a spectrum of morphine equivalent, morphine kind of being one of those opioids, with varying degrees of efficacy or strength, I guess you could say. And so a lot of drugs kind of fall on that spectrum, but the ones that you'll probably be more familiar with are, and Norcos, those are big now.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Because, I think like when you're talking to someone who doesn't have a drug problem, they automatically think like when someone has a drug problem, they're like doing crack and heroin and stuff. But a lot of times it is just like those prescription drugs, and people are accidentally overdosing because they don't know what they're doing per se.
Well, and a lot of times I think in our surveillance, what we found when we go through the toxicology reports that we get from the medical examiner from people who have unfortunately died from overdoses, a lot of times it's multiple drugs that are in their system. And so sometimes it's a mixture of heroin, cocaine, or methamphetamine. So it's also a lot of polydrug use as well. And certainly the presence of fentanyl, as Molly said, is what is highly dangerous and can lead to those overdose deaths in particular.
Well, on that note, we're going to just take a short break, and we'll be back with more from Molly and Jimena in the It Is Possible opioid campaign. And we're back. And I would like to talk about, you mentioned like Narcan and stuff, and what is that, and why people that maybe have a problem should have it near or be ready to call 911.
Yeah, so Narcan or naloxone is an overdose reversal medication that now has become much more widely available than it used to be. That is part of what we wanted to incorporate in this campaign, is making sure people understood the importance of having naloxone, of how to administer naloxone, and how to get naloxone, because there are a lot of places in our community, organizations that distribute naloxone. And now even in Michigan, you can order naloxone by mail. And especially there are lots of concerns about people having access to naloxone during the pandemic, when so many other kind of traditional outreach and other services have been modified because of the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, talking of before the show that it is harder to get medical attention because of the pandemic. So yes, it's something that we need to be talking about. Molly, did you want to mention something?
Well, I would just add to that there's been a concerted effort to get naloxone into the hands of people who are using drugs, because those are the people that are closest to those using drugs. And so I think it's not just naloxone itself, but making sure naloxone makes it to the people who need to have it. And I think that's been a bigger feature of the more recent strategies in naloxone distribution than it has been in the past.
So what are some of the, resources that you have available through this campaign that are going to help people?
Well, so unfortunately, this campaign launched just as we started getting COVID cases locally. And then, we're all focused on COVID, rightly so, in the health department. But we hope that at least some initial effort to get the campaign out there was successful. We really bombarded the community with billboards and bus ads and other kinds of materials. But for people, now thinking about kind of our life during COVID, I think we're really trying to work with those community organizations that do distribution of naloxone, and like Molly said, that really train people who are either themselves using drugs or have loved ones or friends or people in their lives who are using drugs. We're trying to ensure that naloxone gets out as much as possible to the people that continue to do that work. Also, through our health department website, you can look at the materials that we have available, including posters that feature Molly and video as well. And we have those materials available. So if organizations or community members want some of those materials themselves to distribute, they can contact the health department, and our information is readily available on how to help distribute those materials. And more importantly, this campaign actually ended up being more than just Washtenaw County. So the campaign was funded through the Community Mental Health Partnership of Southeast Michigan, which is a regional organization. And so parts of this campaign also were used in Livingston County, Monroe, Lenawee. I think those are the 4 counties. Maybe I'm missing one, Molly. But
Washtenaw, Livingston, Lenawee, Monroe. Got it.
Yeah, those 4. So it's also great because the campaign is not just in Washtenaw County, but in all of the region.
Yeah. Well, before we go, why don't you guys talk about if someone's ready and they're ready to get the help that they need, why they should do it. And maybe Molly, maybe you can mention on your own, like your own life circumstances and how your life has improved. The life that maybe you always wanted to have.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a tricky question because, in my community, in the recovering community, we talk about these like moments of clarity that you have. I think what's key though is, when I had my moment of clarity, there was an opportunity for me to go to treatment, and that's not always the case. And so I think in some instances, it's harder than others to get the help that you need. But, there are community recovery groups. There's 12-step groups that you can always engage in. There's an increasing number of crisis centers that you can go to. There's a crisis line you can call. There are services available for people when they get that moment of clarity. And to the second part of your question about why it's worth it, it's one of those things that actually it's funny. I recently became I was a parent. I became a parent again, and recovery is like parenthood in the way that, a parent, before being a parent, people would talk about being a parent to me, and I'd be like, that sounds weird, like maybe not that great. I think when I was using, the idea of recovery was like, okay, well, maybe I wouldn't be in trouble anymore, but it didn't look that great. Mm-hmm. I watched these people, they had jobs, they had, normal lives. They didn't go out and party. They weren't like, living it up. They didn't have all this money, and it wasn't as attractive to me. But now that I have these, and I'm in recovery and I have this stability, if I got the things I wanted, I don't think I would be very happy. I have this kind of beautiful life, marked by a stability and a contentedness that I never would have had. I think there's a big pull when you're in active use to that kind of chaos. And that's really the hardest part to leave behind. But I think, if you have that moment of clarity, it's important to pursue it, because what I have now is so beautiful. And unfortunately, it wasn't something that I could have while I was using. It just wasn't possible for me. And I think that was a big piece of why I ended up getting help, because I finally realized that I couldn't lead the life I wanted to lead. I couldn't be a good daughter, a good friend. I couldn't, go to school and do the things that I wanted to in life and still use. And that was my reality. And I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to pursue something different when I was ready to do it, which goes back to what Jimena said about the importance of having harm reduction services available, because I also lived long enough to be able to make that choice. So, and I'm really happy to be able to talk about it, because, if I help one person, it was worth it.
That's amazing. Jimena, did you want to add anything else?
Well, I think just going back to what Molly talked about at the beginning about the survey that was done and the stigma, I think certainly this campaign, one of the goals was to really address some of the stigma that continues to exist. I think there's still a lot of work to do among providers, and how we can continue to educate providers about harm reduction, about helping people move through the continuum, ideally, into recovery, how to provide care to people who do use drugs. I mean, I think that's also part of why we at the health department incorporated not only this campaign, but also in the long run, some training even for our staff to ensure that as we deliver services, we are not perpetuating that stigma.
Well, I want to thank you both for coming on the show and talking about It Is Possible.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
For more on this and other programs, visit a2gov.org/CTN. Visit youtube.com/CTN Ann Arbor to see all that we have to offer, and remember to like, comment, and share. Thanks for watching, and tune in next time to FYI.